Good evening. Thank you for coming and welcome to the select board meeting here in the Don A. Russell Meeting Room on March 19th, 2026. If you could join me in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Patty, would you please call the roll?
I will. Good evening, gentlemen. Roland Tufts.
He's absent tonight, excused.
Thank you. Ann Callahan.
Present.
Ryan Holmes.
I am here.
David Kenny, excuse me.
I'm here. Both of us.
Mike Labby.
I'm here.
Okay, and I noticed the town manager, Mark Waltz, is also at the head table. So all present except for Roland Tufts.
Did he call up? Yeah. Okay. Yep. Thank you, Patty. And now for the town manager's report.
Good evening. We are anxiously anticipating the arrival of our new fire chief, Glenn Gordon, who's going to start work on Monday. And more good news, we filled one of our public works openings. We only have 2 to go. If you have a CDL or are willing to get one to help keep Topsham looking great, come see us. If you would like to file for a new property tax exemption, homestead, veterans, etc., the deadline is April 1st. Come on in. No need to refile if you already have an exemption. Finally, Clerk Campbell is happy to report we had our first wedding at the town office yesterday. If you need an affordable wedding venue, contact us. $75 for the ceremony and no charge for the space. That's it.
Thank you. Now for board and committee reports. There's just one this evening. That is me. I wanted to update the select board on where the county budget is sitting currently. And right now we've gone through the beginning phases of the process. We've had the budget presented to us. And as of this evening, we started the discussions of the line items and where we're going with that. Ultimately, what I wanted to get across to you guys or you all tonight was that the proposal initially right now sits at 11.64% for the increase in budget from fiscal year 26 to the proposed fiscal year 27. That does have an impact on us because when we look at the tax revenue sharing portion, Topsham's portion is about 19.65%. It's the second largest to Bath. Bath has the next piece, but we'll pay 20% of that increase. We'll notice that increase as well. Again, this is more or less because the 3 parts of our budget with the school, the county, and then the town, it's important to understand all the different facets that are coming in, especially the ones that we may not have control over. What I can do is also update you with the information that I've gotten this evening. So if you have anything that you would like me to discuss on that budget advisory committee, I'm happy to address it. We've had some conversations about certain topics. One of the big things was that the county jail is now paid off. And that was a $600,000 payment every year that they now aren't having to make. One of the things that we've discussed in that is they're using that $600,000 for capital improvements now, or starting to consider reserve accounts for certain capital improvements. And that kind of quickly absorbed that 600,000. So when we look at this 11.64%, we're also talking about that. That's also with that $600,000 that is not spent on the jail is now coming in here. That will impact us moving forward, especially as we start thinking about all these different reserve accounts that they want to hold. Because next year you don't have that $600,000 to kick that in. So it might look like a greater increase. Again, the budget advisory committee is looking at all of these different pieces to the budget in ways that we can make it as least impactful to the taxpayers we can, while also trying to make sure the county has all the services for safety and everything else that we need. And now that's my report. Okay, moving on. Before we get into public comment tonight, we do have, I think, maybe a long night ahead of us for some comments. And one agenda item in particular that addresses the conversation around recode And I want to ask the board what we want to do in this regard, and I want to make a suggestion that we take public comment normally, like we would here. But then when it comes to recode, maybe save some of that comment for before our discussion so that we can separate it out and hear everybody right before our conversation. This way, we're not getting the public comment now, going through our agenda and then getting to it afterwards. It just might be a little bit easier for us to get through the agenda and listen to everybody that has anything.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you want to have any public comment not related to recode now, and
Yes.
then just before the recode conversation, have those then.
And have public comment then, yes, and then after that, we'll have a conversation based on those, that and
And
everything else, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I would make a motion, but I don't need to do that. Yeah, I do, I wanna do that.
You can take public comment anytime you want.
Yeah, okay, so
that
I don't need
you
to
all
do that.
consensus.
I don't need to do that, okay, so with that, let's take public comment, and just regular public comment not related to the recode, if anybody has any public comment. Anybody online? None? Okay. Then we will move on and we'll save the public comments for that down the road. All right, correspondence. Do anybody receive any correspondence? Okay, seeing none. Moving right down the agenda into adjustments to the agenda. We do have 2 adjustments to the agenda this evening. One of them is we're gonna add 26-32. If I can pull it out here. 2632 is consideration and any appropriate action to request from the History Committee to provide a letter to the Bridge Advisory Committee on naming process for the new Topsham Brunswick Bridge. That is gonna get added to the end of our list, but I would,
We've done before executive session.
yeah, I would make,
Subsequence.
yeah, I would make a motion that we add that to the agenda if there's a second. Okay, motioned by Ryan Holmes, seconded by Dave Kenny. Any discussion on that?
We
And,
go on sequence, we get that for the executive session.
oh, do you want to do that?
I hate to go to executive session if it goes.
Oh, that's the other adjustment. We're gonna table the executive session. That's the next adjustment we'll talk
Okay.
about.
Quiet.
Okay, any other? All right, those in favor? Okay, that is unanimous. Added. The second adjustment to the agenda is the removal of executive session. After talking with the town manager Waltz and thinking about our evening and how long it is, we would like to remove the executive session for this evening. It is not something that is pressing and we can move it to our next meeting. So I would make a motion that we remove the executive session from our agenda.
Second.
Okay, motion by Ryan Holmes, seconded by Ann Callahan. Any conversation? Okay, all in favor? And that's unanimous as well. Okay, moving down the list, consent calendar, approval of the minutes of the regular select board meeting on March 5th, 2026. Do I have a motion?
I make
But we already started going.
a motion to accept the select board meeting minutes from March 5th, 2026 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Ann Callahan and we have a second from Mike Labby. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That is unanimous in favor of. We have no public hearings tonight. We have no unfinished business, no old business. Let's move into new business. Item 2626, consideration and any appropriate action to apply and accept a multi-jurisdictional ATV enforcement educational grant.
Good evening, everybody. Mark Hagan, Chief of Police. I was all excited. I thought everybody was here
For you?
to support our ATV grant. Apparently not, so I'll just try to get it out of the way here. This will be the 3rd year in a row that Maine Warden Service has wanted to partner with us to do some ATV enforcement and education in the town of Topsham. As you are probably aware, town has about 16 miles of trails in town. Every once in a while in the summer, we get a little bit of mayhem on the trails, or even most recently, a couple weeks ago on public road with ATVs. So we partnered with them the last 2 years. We want to do it again this year to be for a total of $4,000 for us to work hand in hand with the wardens on just coming out and working the trails and doing some enforcement. So they run the grant. It doesn't cost the town any money, and what they do is they reimburse us. We turn everything in, all our receipts in every few months, and they reimburse it, so the town wouldn't be owed any monetary funds. And we're just requesting approval to partner with the Warden Service for the 2026 grant.
Great, thank you, Chief. Do we have any questions for Chief on that?
Hello.
Okay, I would entertain a motion.
I make a motion to permit the Topsham Police Department to partner with the Maine Warden Service to apply for and accept a multi-jurisdictional ATV enforcement / educational grant.
Great, we have a motion from Ann Callahan. Do I have a second? Seconded by Dave Kenny. Do we have any discussion? All in favor? And that is unanimous.
Thank you.
No more chases.
Thank you, Chief.
Say goodbye to him, everybody. Thank you for coming.
All right, moving on. Item 26-27, consideration and any appropriate action on the appointment of Lori Williamson to the Bike Ped Committee and Adam Pride to the History Committee.
Well, we interviewed this afternoon. It was really nice. Lori Williamson is applying for the Bike and Pedestrian Committee, and she has served on many boards. She's an avid cyclist. She was just delightful, and we think she would be a good candidate. Adam Pride he's in IT, and our History Committee could really use some IT people to document things in computers, and he's an avid archaeologist and loves a good story. He too was considered to be a good candidate. So in light of that and knowing what happened in the interviews, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to appoint Lori Williamson to the Bike Ped Committee and Adam Pride to the History Committee.
Oh, great. We have a motion from Ann Callahan and seconded by Mike Labby. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? That is unanimous in favor of. And one shameless plug regarding that. We've been having a lot of great interviews for committee members, and kind of a shameless plug to the public. What a great way to participate in your town. We're seeing a lot of people come out that want to participate, and we encourage that, and we're very happy to see that. So if you see an opening for something that you guys or any individual is interested in, please reach out to the town. We're happy to have you on the town and serve with the rest of us to make the town as best we possibly can. Okay. Let's get into 26-28. Before the board has our conversation, as we discussed at the beginning, I'm going to open up public comment for individuals to speak on behalf or against what we're talking about, just for us to get some information. And with that, I will open public comment.
I defer to you, Dawn, if you are going to keep speaking.
Mr. Chair, okay, we have a presentation to go through, and Marilyn's going to help me with this. If you would rather.
You're just gonna have to motion with me when you want to change.
So Marilyn, are you running that?
Fine.
No, that's fine. Take your time.
Get your word for a second. It's so tiny.
I don't know.
Is it possible to open that up, or is that about the figure we're gonna make this?
Oops. She's trying to.
No, I don't need to see
She
this.
wants to move it
Right,
out,
okay.
okay?
Well, I was thinking this one, it's probably the side.
And Patty, this is Don. Thank you, Mr. Chair and board. Put together, kind of an overview of where I think we're at, where we've been, where we are going, and at least what I would ask this board to consider in their consideration of how you want to move forward. I'd say that my opening comment is, and this is for the record, whatever you decide, we will support. This planning board's responsibility to share our concerns with you, so that you can make informed decisions. So, and I read the manager's memo, and like I said, whatever option you decide, we will support that. So,
Speak up a little louder. Is the mic on?
any better?
Yeah.
All right, so I should restate that. For the record, whatever you decide, we will support. It's the planning board's responsibility to share our concerns with you so that you can make informed decisions. Just try to summarize a little bit of history on where this has been. And certainly I'm sure the staff could provide you the exact dates on all of this stuff, but this is the best that I could capture in reviewing my calendar. The comprehensive plan was adopted at town meeting in 2019. I was at the time the chair for both TDI and the planning board, and asked the town to establish CPIC, and had a very good result with CPIC, and the way that whole process worked after the previous comprehensive plan. It took a little bit, but they did get one established. The first listening session that I am aware of was October 6, 2021. My vice chair and I were invited to a meeting with CPIC that was orchestrated by HAP and Julie Erdman on November 3rd. We attended a stakeholders meeting, or at least I did, with the developers on July 18th, 2023. And I probably should have left that note off, but that's the way at least a number of them felt. I think we started joint workshops between planning board and CPIC around October 3rd, 2023. Conducted refed workshops off and on until late 2025. And then again, the planning director can provide you with the specific dates. Met with codes in July to basically go through some of it and talk about how to maybe what I would call do at least some level of understanding of what the implications were for the code, right? And in particular, because we wouldn't be able to get red lines. At the same time frame, I was asked to ask Dean Catlin to have his civil engineer put together take a look at their project across the street with the recode, and also take a look at Park. He basically put together a proposal that was presented to a joint workshop. And when I say he, I'm referring to Chris Belanger. Results from both parties were distributed to all concerned, or from my meeting with the codes officer, as well as the civil engineer, and all that information, if you would like it, can be provided to you. Like I said, I can provide that. So one of the things that I think is important to understand here is as we've been doing this process, it's included 3 town managers, 4 planning directors, I can't tell you how many planners, and so on. Findings from at least the documents that were provided for the joint session were that PCDs, PRDs, et cetera, were eliminated totally from the plan. And that was based on a document, which I have here if you'd like. It's about 6 by 6 foot wide, but the bottom line, none of those are currently in the current proposal. Doesn't mean that they might not consider it, but right now the best of my knowledge or not. With the elimination of village center and the creation of transition zones, many properties across town would become non-conforming. And again, I have the document provided by staff that indicates that. And there's a few examples in here to show that. Park Drive was hit the hardest, and that was staff's comment. And while I provided documentation a number of years ago, the TDI basically is the developer for at least the first portion of Park Drive, and needs to be included in discussions because they actually still have a vote along with the planning board. I'm not sure if that actually happened. There was a memo created on 12/1. My understanding, we just received it on 3/6, right? So I'm not quite sure what the rationale there is for taking 3 months for that to be provided to the planning board in our assessments. The next 3 slides, I don't need to spend a lot of time on it, but I was provided this indicating that a few comments are highlighted where the upper village businesses are being made non-conforming, not true, and so forth. I won't refute that. I'll just let the documents speak for themselves. If you look at the next 2 pages, and this again was provided by staff, it will show you, you can go down through and pick whatever property you want. But a little bit hard to read here, but if you look at some of the properties on Main Street, essentially auto sales in particular, but other properties were hit with at least this round of the recode and indicates that they would be non-conforming. The next one, I believe, is Park Drive. And as I said, and I can go through the list, right? But again, I can also provide you the full package that was provided by staff, indicating all the properties on Park Drive that would become non-conforming. Now, the issue with non-conforming, without going into a lot of detail, is that, and you should ask the codes officer for his opinion, but basically if something is considered non-conforming, then even if they want to add a few thousand square feet, they can't do it, right? Because it's now non-conforming. So if we continue down that path, that makes an awful lot of the properties, an awful lot of our businesses, whether it's VIP or auto dealerships or Hancock, or not Hancock, but a number of the properties, you know, Goodwill and a number of those other properties non-conforming. This is a copy of the 12/1/2025 document that we were given about a week or so ago, like I said, 3/6. That document basically would indicate that some of what I've told you here, at least is now being considered by CPIC to be, I'll say, corrected or changed or whatever you'd like to call that. The bottom line there is, I think it's still lacking from a standpoint of PCD and some other things, but more importantly, I don't want to be the one to tell you that. And I've asked Chris Belanger to look at this and again, come back and do the same thing he did here and say, what does that now mean to the projects that we've asked him to look at? Next slide. It's really more just to show you a comparison. This comes out of the presentation that Chris put together. It's about, and it must be about 48 pages long. And we have some hard copies of this if you'd like. But I can also either ask staff to send it to you, or we can send this document to you, which has the full package that Chris Belanger presented to the joint session. Probably the main thing to point out here is on the right is the existing code. On the left is the new proposed code. On the right, Village Center, which is in the purple, no longer exists and is basically now considered upper village. If you also look at kind of the darker blue sections, primarily off to your left where MUC is, which is Topsham Fair Mall, those blue sections there's another one basically across from Duncan, but the bottom line is those are the transition zones, which I assume now are being called mixed transitional zones. So when we talk about that, those areas, that's specifically what we're talking about as far as I would say the bulk of the major changes. The next slide and I'll let you read this when you have an opportunity. But if you go down through, this is one talking about Park Drive and what the impacts are with going to that new transition zone on Park Drive, some of which may be corrected with the 12 amendment. And then I have a couple examples of PCDs. This is Highland Green, or actually this is Highland Green. As you know, we have a number of sections that have been, I shouldn't say section, a number of projects in this town that have come through PCD process, right? And PCD is planned commercial development. Basically, because of the town's code allowing for PCD, we've actually had, I think, quite an impact on the growth of this town. So PCD is really what would still need to be done across the street. PCD is what helped us build out, the Highland Greens and other projects. And PCD is actually what's helping with the new dental arts building going up Village Drive. And again, I'll let you read what Chris's analysis was of those. That's out of his full package. So, in my opinion, we made it through the easier chapters. Without red lines, it's certainly a lot more difficult, and I think everybody would agree to that. And it's also been very difficult to get a set of bullets that represents what we're talking about as well. We discussed a lot of items, but we have a lot of items to discuss, right? Whether it's getting into the form-based zoning chapter, getting into the materials chapter, and getting into, conditional use. There's just a number of other chapters that we still need to plow our ways through. And I'll say in particular, when you look at the materials, and I'll say it in my terms, which I know most people in this room aren't going to like, but basically we're dictating to the developers what materials they can use. In one of our meetings, I actually think the gentleman that just walked in, asked, what about a glass building? And I don't know whether it's Oracle or who does glass buildings, but whoever does all glass buildings, that question was asked. We went and looked at a picture of a glass building. And then once we looked at the details, it basically said 15% of that building that's allowed in Upper Village could be glass, right? So the architect that was on the board at the time said that'll cover the windows, right? So I hate to say it, but the devil is in the details, right? So we still have, like I said, the biggest chapters to review. As far as my vice chair, and trust me, I respect him a lot, right? He is, because he's on the board, that I think we've been such a good board. And right now he believes we're about 60 to 70% complete. I think we're closer to about 50%. You can talk me up to 60, but the bottom line is I think we still have a long ways to go with this project. Our vote from last Thursday was to keep the current as the baseline and apply the best features of Recode incrementally. And don't misunderstand me, there's a lot of good things that have come out of the efforts of these people in this room. But that's the direction we would like to go. The new code, even with our best input, will be hard for staff, developers, and their civil engineers to interpret. And I do hear from quite a few people that have looked at the new code. And when I say people, I'm talking about engineering types, civil engineers, site engineers, and so forth. And they really have struggled with trying to interpret and understand how they can perform. I just think that if we're not careful, we'll have developers basically saying Topsham's too hard to work, right? And I think they'll look at elsewhere where it's much easier. I think I'm missing a page here. Okay, well, that's okay. I can ad lib.
Is this the one you're looking for?
No, we've talked about that. No, the other piece of the discussion is, and I did have a full slide that somehow dropped out, is if you look at full recodes, right? And again, I'm not the expert on what the impacts are and so forth. But if you, and Marilyn, maybe you can come up and help with this part. But if you look at Chat GPT, and that's why I need Marilyn, because I'm not a user of Chat GPT, right? But the bottom line, if you start asking some questions, the first thing that Chat GPT says is, if you're going to do a full recode, you need to do an impact assessment, right? And the reasons is because, did you find it?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think it's this one.
All right,
Sorry.
that's okay. You can stay because you're going to
Yeah.
be picking up anyway. So I'll finish my ad lib. It's just important to be able to understand, what are we doing to ourselves? What are the unintended consequences and so forth? And when you have a very massive type shift, it's, at least from ChatGPT's perspective and all the research it's gone out and pulled in, is you have an impact to the town's valuation, right? You have an impact to property values. And I know that we're all interested in maintaining the property values as well as maintaining our current tax base and having protections for all of our residents, right? So I think if I did nothing else, right, I would ask this town to please ask the town assessor to look at what the implications are before you make your decision, right? But that's, again, a recommendation. It's totally up to you. Marilyn's done a little bit of, you wanna pick up?
Yep.
All right, Patty, this is
It's
Marilyn
okay.
taking over.
Is it okay? Yeah, okay. So I guess I'll save this slide for later, but so we did have some, like I said, we've been doing some research and we've been filling things into ChatGPT, and it's been spitting us out some numbers. And one of the numbers that we looked at was what is the value impact when you change a use, from permitted to conditional or from permitted to prohibited, and then what happens when you're non-conforming. So those are just estimates. Again, that's an AI estimate. But use table changes can affect rebuilding restrictions, expansion limits, and from those things, financing problems, insurance issues. And then just to let you know how much money is on the line, just here on Main Street, if all of those car dealerships and the gas stations too, that was on the list, go into non-conforming status, that's $10 million of real estate. So, going forward, really paying attention to the use table and making sure that things do not go into non-conforming status, I think is important. ChatGPT thought that too. And then the other big item in the recode is the form-based regulations. And I know that has been told to you that form-based regulations do not increase the cost of property owners, but I don't think that's true. As a landowner, as a business owner, the form-based stuff in there is a big layer of regulation that we don't currently have. And it applies to, if you're thinking on the map, it's from the high school, basically, maybe a little further than the high school, actually Napa. And then it goes all the way down Main Street. And it goes 196 up 295 to the Crooker property, all of the mall area. And it dictates, how much glass the building's gonna have, the roof lines, the story house, how many entrances you have to have. You have to have an entrance in every couple segments. Street walls, there's courtyard requirements, which is basically you have to put a little park in your project, but then, you don't just have to build that park, you have to maintain it for the rest of the life of the building. And we don't have anything like this in our zone right now, in our code right now. There's at most maybe a facade guideline, some landscaping guideline. We don't have any of that stuff right now. So this is a big new set of regulations, requirements. And there's a few different ways that the government can get into your pocket. One of them is taxes, the other one is regulations. So, there's a big cost here. And it's not just to big developers either. If one of these little tiny houses on Main Street wants to become something else or change, it's gonna have to come into conformity with all these new rules. That's how zoning works. So you don't get to say what you want your project to be. You don't get to pick and I said this in the planning board, if you've reviewed that, I'm sorry if this is redundant. But you just don't have any, you have to do all these things. You have to put all these things in your building. You have to build brick. There's all these things. And then Article 8 dictates materials. You can't have, a fully sided structure with the less expensive materials. Vinyl is out. And, I grew up in a construction family in Topsham where we say vinyl is final, so it just, things like this to pay attention to, but these are the things that are grabbing people's attention and, people are taking note of these very expensive demands that are in the free code. So this is the, let's see, facade materials, right? So if you look at that, these are all these facades, these are all very expensive improvements. We have stone, we have brick, we have concrete masonry units, but not just any concrete masonry units. We have to have the stone kind, fancy, expensive. And wood is still available. And then these are the minor facade. You can have vinyl, but it's got to be on the minor facade and it can only be 35%. So it's a very small portion of your building that could be that if you were needing to save money. So these are things that really need to be, I think, paid attention to, because these are the things that are going to drive the cost of development up. And this is just one thing I've picked out here. This is just facade materials. There's other things, there's glass portions and it's all very, very technical in a way that our current code is not very technical. So I think this is where people are getting tripped up, not understanding how things are going to work, not understanding how they're going to be going through, the planning board process. And these are also things that I don't think are getting explained very well. I really think, sometimes when people are talking about the recode, it feels sales pitchy to me. And I understand that. I understand there's a lot of work behind it, but there's also a very real reality here that things are going to cost more. And so the next thing is the estimate, and I just did the siding. This is another AI. And these are the costs of vinyl siding versus wood siding versus fiber cement versus brick veneer and what they would cost additionally. So, and then this is a small property estimate of the extra it would cost. And one thing I didn't talk about here is the need for engineering and architects. So, if you know anything about construction, engineers and architects don't turn on their computer for less than $5,000, So there's a very big added cost in professional services here. And then this is the growth zone. So if I zoom in a little bit here, I don't know if I'll let you, but. So this is the town's growth zone. So in our comprehensive plan done in 2019, the town mapped out a growth zone. And the heart of the growth zone is the center there. These sort of tan things are neighborhood transformation zones. So the heart of this growth zone is that purple areas and then the mall area. So if most of the form-based code in that, and this is a point I made at the planning board the other night, and I'm not trying to hurt anyone's feelings with all these things. This is real. If the form-based code is all in that downtown area and it costs more to build there, the development is either pushed to a different town, not Topsham, or on the outskirts of the area, not downtown. But in the comprehensive plan, a growth center-based comprehensive plan means the town needs to get the growth into one small part of town so that the outside of town is preserved. So that it's, rural, wild and free, whatever. So I think the form-based code is really going to be working against that. And, that's not what the comprehensive plan directs it to do. If anything, deregulating downtown. some of the most beautiful cities in the world were built without regulation, so. Okay. And then I'm just gonna go back to one slide because the last thing I wanted to talk about was, I wanted to talk about communication and process. Because I've been following the recode for all 6 of its years. When it first came out, the land that I have my family's business on, down on Old Augusta Road over by the middle school, was all in this form-based code, but it's not in the growth zone. So I went in early on and I got that taken out, but I've still been reviewing the code because the code is peppered with things that I don't understand, that I think are heavier regulation than they formerly were. So I've still been following. And it has been a painful process. The communication is just, it's hard communication. So the communication between, since I've been on the planning board, which is only 2 weeks, no take backs. You know, the planning CPIC, planning board information sharing, it could use work. You know, for example, if CPIC has a meeting and they talk about, we're gonna change all these things, a small, short bullet points of what is gonna be changed, sent to everyone, could be a helpful thing. Recently I asked for some information, from the planning department. And I was trying to get caught up and I was looking for minutes, and there's no minutes to any of their workshops. So if you do want to follow their work, if you decide you want to do some research and you are looking for their workshops, you have to sit through many hours of video. But if there was minutes or even just a small list of things they were doing, it would greatly improve the process. But also there just doesn't seem to be a ton of communication between those 3 entities. And then the response time, and this has been all of the 6 years, between meetings and edits is so long. So you go to a meeting, you say your concerns, the plans go off into planning space, and it's not seen again for a year, maybe a year and a half. A new draft comes out, you know, so, and then it's lost. You know, you have to search through that whole document to see if the plans that you asked for were made. So that part has been very frustrating, and I know I'm not the only person who feels that. So I know the question was gonna be posed, you know, will the planning board agree to review this? And if that does happen, I would recommend meeting, edits, second meeting to review the edits, so that all these ideas don't get lost in time and space. And then the final thing, well, consensus building, something we always use. I really think consensus building is important, and I think it's important between the 2 committees. And then the absence of a red line really is hurting this review process. And I realize that this is something that everyone says we can't have, but I think this would have gone so much smoother if there was a red line from the beginning. Because when there's a red line, when everyone is looking at the same document with the same thing that got changed, all the eyes are on the change. You can fuss about the change and then move along. And on the next version, you can check your last red line, see that the thing that you asked for got changed, and, you know, move on. So that's all I have to say tonight, and I appreciate you listening and following along with me through my clunky slideshow presentation. That was my first note, so thank you.
Well, thank you guys for your comment. As Mike back and sits down, any other public comment?
I don't know what that was. Was that a pointer?
Go right ahead.
Hello. See if I can adjust it for short people. Susan Ray Reeves, 14 Twin Pond Road. Been chairing the comp plan implementation committee for all 6 years, so this has been helpful. You've heard a lot. My comments tonight are very different. I know that you did get a couple of pages along with your agenda tonight. But that was before the planning board meeting. So I put together some new remarks focused on planning board comments and decision, the vote that they took. Topsham is very fortunate to have a lot of smart people living here, working here, and volunteering their time on committees, boards, and commissions. You've heard some of that tonight. I've lived here for 12 years, and I've been impressed by the dedication and care put into town business. But there are competing interests. There are conflicts. If this weren't such an important moment, I wouldn't take the time to go into detail about statements that have been made. But I feel like it's important to address some particular statements. One thing I would agree, I think consensus building is crucial. We've not had success in our efforts to do that. And you'll hear further along sort of how the work of sort of implementing the comp plan was divided so that CPIC as a committee that is focused on the comprehensive plan and not familiar with the current land use code, focused on that town center where we're using form-based code, and the planning board, which is familiar with the current code, was reviewing the code outside the town center. So that was a division that came along at a certain point. You got from Don Span some of the very early history. I won't go there, but I just wanted to sort of say how I see this current moment. Starting at the end of their February 26th meeting, the planning board began a conversation about recode that continued on March 12th and ended with a 6-1 vote to stop working on recode and take an entirely different direction. This is a big deal. The Comp Plan Implementation Committee, CPIC, has been working on recode, as you've heard, for 6 years. The planning board too has been working on aspects of it, I think for over 4 years. Lots of time and effort have been devoted by staff and volunteers, and a significant amount of our tax dollars have been invested, first in the 2019 comp plan update, and then in recode. So what's the issue? The planning board at this point, after these years, quite a lot of work. I heard Don Span's estimate that he thinks we're 50% of the way through. Some people are cautious, some are optimistic. Scott Libby thinks we're 60% of the way through. I think we're 80% of the way through. I think we are really approaching the finish line if we apply ourselves. So the issue here is the planning board wants to stop working on recode, scrap it. CPIC wants to continue. It's your call. Depending on how you approach it, the 2019 comp plan update can seem like a friendly, interesting vision for Topsham's future. So for some, the plan can inspire us. For others, it might seem more threatening. We all know that growth and development are inevitable. The plan starts with that fact. We know that growth and development is inevitable. But one of the things that the plan calls for, there aren't too many of these printed, but you can get it online. One of the things that this calls for is to stop, to the best of our ability, to stop sprawl and have more deliberate, careful growth. And you've heard that from the previous two speakers. So how growth and development happen is the question. The single most important thing guiding how development happens is the town zoning and land use code. If people are happy with the way that growth and development have been happening for the past 20, 30, 40 years, change can seem unnecessary. The 2019 comp plan does call for change. I don't want to be redundant, but I think it's worth running through some of the big ideas that are called for in the plan. People said they want streets that are safer, for pedestrians and for cyclists. People walking and cycling have been killed or seriously injured on Topsham streets in the past few years. People want to see safer streets. They want more social gathering spots. They want a walkable town center. They want fast broadband internet. They want affordable housing and different types of housing. They want growth that is thoughtful and deliberate, that prevents sprawl, that maintains green spaces while strengthening the town's tax base. They want open governance, local and regional mobility, and a more sustainable future. Now that sounds really like huge, maybe impossible, but when you look at some of the things that have happened in the last 6 years, one of the first things I think about is open governance. You all and staff have made tremendous strides in having open governance. The fact that all of the meetings and workshops are visible now to people, to attend at home or to view afterwards, that's fabulous. Documents are, available ahead of time. So we've made tremendous strides there. There's an energy committee that's done a lot of work. You're very familiar with them. There's a bicycle and pedestrian committee. You've added someone there tonight. We're making strides in a lot of these areas. So when the CPUC, the Comp Plan Update Committee, helped to bring about the plan, and then CPIC has been working to implement it. The thing that's interesting about CPIC and maybe all of the previous committees is we have no authority. None. All we have is the power of persuasion. And we've heard some criticisms of that tonight. Our grounding in the vision of the plan and our relationships in town, that's all we have. And none of us are professional planners. None of us are communications specialists. We don't have a Patty Williams. One of our members takes minutes of our meetings and they're always posted. Always. They're posted on the town website. You can criticize it, but we have done our best to be transparent, to have information there. So in the past 6 years, CPIC and the planning board divided the work, as I've already mentioned, CPIC focusing on the town center where form-based code is used, and the planning board, already familiar with the current code, focused with working with staff to update and clean up the portions of the code outside the town center. Basically the residential zones, the industrial and the light industrial zones. So the stage we arrived at this past summer is with a draft of recode that is not final. You would think, hearing some of the comments tonight, that that was a final version being presented to the planning board to ask you to put on the warrant. Far from it. It is a draft that's ready for planning board engagement with workshops. So this is where the challenging part of things start. Particularly if you're looking at what is proposed compared to what exists in the current code, it's challenging. The reason? Recode is actually a new code. We have said this from the beginning. It's if you want to have a red line process, what you could do is take the current code, put a red line through the entire thing. Recode is a new code. There are very few changes outside that town center where we're using form-based code. There are no substantive changes. It's cleanup and update. And some of that cleanup has been needed for years. The clarity, we've been trying to be clear about this from the beginning. The consultants have supported this, that the red line process just is not available. The new code, the proposed code, needs fresh eyes. As I said, there are no major changes proposed for the residential, industrial, or light industrial zones. But cleanup is needed there as well. It's long overdue. And the language that is in the proposed code for those areas is clearer and more user-friendly. When all of this erupted, the planning board already had done a lot of the review and work on those sections of the code that are not the form-based town center. There's only a little left to do. CPIC and staff have come to the planning board ready to engage and hear feedback. Many adjustments have been made in response to planning board feedback. A long list. They've been made little by little as we've heard that feedback. We've, I think, had 3 or 4 workshops. And some of those workshops arrived at more suggestions than others, but we have taken every one of those suggestions seriously, and modifications have been made, adjustments have been made. My experience working with town staff is that none of them have much free time. They're stretched. They have a lot on their plate. I know that I, as the chair of CPIC, I don't know how other committee chairs work, but when there's something going on that's of interest to me that pertains to the responsibility that I've volunteered for, I check in and find out what's going on. So, you know, there are a lot of things that have happened that, you know, the planning board didn't seem to be up to date on. So when the planning board voted to scrap the whole of Project Recode and continue with a list of items for amendment, I have to say, we were shocked. We were shocked. And at the March 12th planning board meeting, a lot of things were said about Recode and about the 2019 update to the comp plan. And many of the things said were actually inaccurate, or they mischaracterize where we are in the process of working through the review and revision process of Project Recode. So I hope it will help the select board. I'm so glad that you adjusted your agenda and the comments, because I think it's going to help with your discussion. Thank you for doing that. So I hope it will help you as the select board to highlight some of the statements and hear where we think a correction is needed. My concern is that if we don't correct some of the statements made that are inaccurate or misleading about Recode, people will likely take those statements as fact. So these are some of the statements that need to be refuted. And forgive me, it's a bit of a list. First one, Recode has created lots of new zones in the town center. Now you saw the maps. You know how many new zones were created? One new zone. The village center is now called the Upper Village. It's not a new zone. We pretty much used all of the familiar zones, familiar names. Established are suggesting that we establish one new zone. And that is it's the mixed transitional zone. When you look at those areas, that does actually create an area along Park Drive and then along Union Park Road, where there is a natural transition area between two quite different zones. Can be useful to have that. So a lot of the comments focused on the combination of the 2019 comp plan and whether or not Recode is aligned with that. So here are some of the statements. The plan, I'm just going to run through all the statements first, and then I'll go back and deal with them. The plan does not suggest the entire restructuring of new code. The comp plan does not explicitly direct usage of form-based code. The 2019 comp plan does not direct large-scale removal of existing land uses. And the uses removed were mostly blue-collar jobs or businesses. Plan does not direct recode to include heavy new regulatory layers on property owners. And the plan does not direct mandatory density increases everywhere, including in the R3 zones. All right, that's a lot. I'm just going to go back briefly to make some corrections. And when it was said that the plan does not suggest the entire restructuring of new code, at the back of the comp plan is what's called the strategy matrix. You've probably seen that. It's in the book and even online. It's not in a particularly user-friendly form. So one of our early members put it into a spreadsheet so that it can be sorted. And there are 159 strategies that help to guide the implementation of the 9 big ideas. 38 of the 159 directly pertain to the review and revision of the land use code. Some of the strategies get more explicit, but none say anything about incremental change. Now, the plan does not explicitly direct usage of form-based code. That's correct. It doesn't. It doesn't call for form-based code by name. But the plan does call for a walkable town center, mixed-use buildings, zoning that allows for, keywords, greater density, and code and design standards that help to maintain existing character. Those are all things that call for form-based code in order to achieve them. The 2019 comp plan does not direct large-scale removal of existing land uses. And the uses removed, all being blue-collar job related. We have not removed any uses. None in the town center where form-based code is used. What you saw up on the screen, I think, is a chart that was developed by Planning Director Julie Erdman, probably 3+ years ago, somewhere in that range, because we wanted to see where recode would make properties non-conforming. We wanted to see that. One of the things that was specifically pointed to is the car dealerships. Those will be just the same as they are now. We have taken great care not to create non-conforming property owners and businesses. What's referred to in that comment about the large-scale removal of existing land uses is the use table. That is in Article 6 of Recode. This section has not been workshopped yet by the planning board with CPIC. We have wanted workshops. They have been canceled one after another. Some for clear reasons, some not. Over the months of January and February, CPIC spent 3 of our sessions. They're recorded. The minutes would be really weird. So the minutes don't always reflect every single thing that was decided. But we spent 3 sessions working with planning staff to review the use table And it was clear from the moment we set eyes on it with the planning director that this was something that needed further work. And so we have been doing it. We are making some important changes, some of them directly in response to suggestions and comments that the planning board has made over those four workshops. And in the special workshop where a developer came in and shared their project. So it seems to me that criticizing an unfinished 2-page section of the code is unfair. It's unfair to act as though we had intentions to make blue-collar businesses and jobs unable to live in the town center. Recode does not eliminate any uses currently allowed in the town center zones. The plan does not direct Recode to include heavy new regulatory layers on property owners. Now, this is an interesting one. This is a whole different kettle of fish. One person's heavy new regulatory layers are another person's enabling the vision of town residents. If you look at Recode, and I'm hoping some of you have, you'll see that in each and every zone of the town center where a hybrid version of form-based code is used, there is an array of options to choose from. If you want to build on an open lot, you can choose the type of building you want. You can choose height. There's a range of setbacks. And as was discussed, there's a range of materials. None of that is finalized. We are working with the planning board on that. It's not finalized. We have, and you cannot say that we have had deaf ears. When we have heard a criticism, a suggestion, whether it's from stakeholders 3 years ago, we have responded. So the guidelines that are in place are intended to help bring about a more attractive town center. Attractive town centers will also attract both residents and businesses. I think that's a good thing. So one last thing. When it was said that the plan does not direct mandatory density increases everywhere, including the R3 zone, when I heard this said on March 12th, I just thought about the town center, because one of the things right now in the town center is there are some lots in the town center that are not buildable under the current code. The current code. People own property and they can't build there because the lot's not big enough. They're going to have freedom under Recode. There is no, minimum lot size in order to build on that lot, at least if the proposed code moves forward. The thing that's important here is that the proposed code will allow for greater density. And the plan, the comp plan, explicitly calls for allowing greater density. But while it does allow for it, it doesn't mandate it. That is false and misleading. When you have more densely developed properties, I think, subjecting this to the town assessor is a great idea. When you have more densely developed properties, the tax base will increase. That's good for the town. But the other thing that comes up in this particular statement is something that's already been discussed a couple of times, and that is nonconformity. CPIC and staff have taken great care with the new proposed code to avoid creating situations where property owners or business owners will be non-conforming. Sure, they can be grandfathered in. And in the beginning, that seemed to be enough, but then I realized in the process of educating ourselves that if they want to, you've heard this, expand a building's footprint, there can be limitations. So it's not a good thing to be creating, nonconformities. We've worked hard to avoid that. But you know what? In the town's current code, there are many, many properties that are non-conforming right now in our old patched up code. Who's complaining about that? This has happened along the way, and it's something that came up for review because you don't want people to be owning a property that they can't do something with. And the statement calls out the R3 zone specifically. This is the rural area, saying that recode increases density there. You know what? That's an area where CPIC has had no input, zero. This was a cleanup matter. My understanding is that it was a matter of rounding off where instead of acres, square feet was used, and it was a tiny, tiny rounding up or down. So that the change was actually created by the planning board, and it was extremely minimal. So I've taken a lot of time. Thank you for staying with me. In closing, I just want to state that none of the statements that were made at the planning board meeting, in my view, are grounds for throwing out the town's significant investment of time and money. Recode, I think, is quite close to the finish line. I would guess a half dozen workshops could get us there. Now, knowing that I am a hopeless optimist, it might be more like 8, but we're close. That's the point. We're close. And through the entire process, feedback from stakeholders and the planning board have led to adjustments to the proposed code. Recode is a good code. It will be better with the review and comment process. I ask you to continue and finish it. I think the people of Topsham deserve that.
May I, sir?
Why don't we let everybody else make their comments first, and we can have you come back up afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, good evening. Can everybody hear me okay?
Name and address, please.
Yes, my name is Pete Bono, B-O-N-O, 7 Junco Drive, and I'm a CPIC member, have been for 3.5 years. The dismissal of Project Recode by the planning board, I believe, that denies the people of Topsham their vision for their town as laid out in the 2019 update to Topsham's comprehensive plan, in which 600 residents provided extensive input. The comp plan provides the foundation for Project Recode, which translates the people's vision into land use codes and zoning ordinances that address their big ideas, implementation strategies, and concerns for the growth of their town, as Susan has alluded to. In the 2019 comp plan, the residents of Topsham are asking for Recode and its related form-based codes, not by name, but by definition, and 6 of their big ideas that define the look, feel, and character of our town center. And Susan has addressed those big ideas. What I'd like to do is take just a little bit and look closer at Recode's form-based codes, because we've kind of been throwing that around tonight. Form-based code, take a closer look at the form-based codes that the residents of Topsham are looking for by definition in 6 of their 9 big ideas for our town. Form-based codes are community-driven design regulations that control the physical form of the building environment to create a certain type of place. Form-based codes create a certain place by using dimensional standards to shape the spaces between buildings and to control how buildings relate to each other, to streets, sidewalks, on-street parking, street trees, and to other public spaces. Form-based codes allow a community like Topsham to better shape the look and feel of its built environment. They are the blueprint for implementing a community's vision, because form-based codes define and codify the qualities that interact to produce community character. That's our objective, to improve the character of our town. Each of our residents' 9 big ideas in the 2019 plan contain more specific strategies or action items for implementing them. Susan referred to 159 strategies in total. Many asking for updates to the town zoning codes. For example, under big idea number 7 for housing diversity, there are 15 strategies, including these 2 on page 99, related directly to requests for recodes form-based codes, not by name, but by definition. Strategy: update the zoning code to regulate building types by zoning district to ensure new buildings and projects complement the scale and character of the existing neighborhood. There's that word again, character. Strategy: update the zoning code to provide a more stringent set of development standards to control building form, scale, components, placement, materials, and associated site improvements. But the People's 2019 Comp Plan goes a step further, and it applies its 9 big ideas and 159 implementation strategies to quote unquote catalyst sites in town that represent opportunities for future growth. The intent here is to create vibrant, walkable, mixed-use neighborhood centers where currently a neighborhood center is missing or where an existing or emerging center could be made stronger. 4 is in the number 4, future neighborhood centers are drawn and detailed in the comp plan for the Upper Village and Lower Village along Main Street, the Topsham Fair Mall, and the Crooker District. These are the same town center areas to which Recode and its form-based codes are applied. My point here is clearly by design, there's a direct correlation between the 2019 comprehensive plan and Project Recode with its form-based codes, as well as updates to the town's current traditional zoning codes and town ordinances. We at CPIC asked the planning board not to dismiss the People's Project Recode and related form-based codes, but to continue working with the Director of Planning, the Recode consultants, and CPIC in reviewing Recode's latest draft and make recommendations for changes to the Director of Planning. Only then can Recode be properly finished by the town and go back to the residents of Topsham for their approval at a future town meeting vote. And speaking of approval, I'd like to thank Scott Libby, Vice Chair of the Planning Board, who voted against the demise of Recode because he understands its benefits to Topsham and how it implements the vision of its residents. I'd also like to thank my fellow residents of Topsham, some of whom are here tonight to show their support for Recode. And thank you to you, the members of the Select Board, for considering how to proceed now with Recode, a project by and for the people of Topsham. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
Good evening, Tim Dunham, 958 Lewiston Road. Recently returned to the planning board after 20 years off. And I didn't know I was walking into this season of Recode. Thank you for the prep. So my review of it has been overwhelming. It's a lot to take in, and I honestly think if you put it in front of voters, they couldn't possibly understand what they're voting for. So we need to trust extremely intelligent people to prepare this, and they're doing a lot of work on this. My only point is that it feels like a bill being presented to Congress that has stuff in there that we can't understand how it's going to implement or change the implementation through the town. But I think that there's too much evidence from what has been presented on the negative impact that it would have on a number of different properties. I don't think we have had one property presented to us saying this one will stay exactly the way it was. It will be conforming. I'm sure there's got to be plenty of them, but none of them were presented. I'm hearing, unfortunately, the opposite from people that have presented their properties at our planning board meetings. So I think the red line is the way to go. I think there needs to be change. I think that their work should not be discarded. Their work should be implemented, just not all or nothing. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would have permission to speak. I'm a former town selectman in this town for 12 years. My family still has property in this town, and I was on the board in the early 2000s.
Excuse me, I didn't get this gentleman's name. Could I please have your name and
sorry.
address, sir?
Jim Truziani. I'd like to have a moment to speak and hopefully bring some lights to what I'm hearing tonight for this, if I may. First of all, I'm here because nobody's asked me to be here. I've been following it from a long time, watching it. And I want to bring back some of the things that have been said about the finances of the town. We're sitting in a room, two buildings, public safety building, this building was because we grew. Early 2000s, we had nothing. We had an old fire station. We had an old municipal building. We had a police department and ambulance working out of a 2-story house. We had 25-year-old plow trucks, 15 to 30-year-old fire engines. 4 years, from 2004 to 2008, the town grew. It grew because it was allowed to grow. The town grew from $520 million worth of assessed value to $640 million in assessed value in 4 years. The town had 4 years of tax decreases of $1.10, 70 cents, 40 cents, and a quarter. At the same time, the school was averaging 7% increases. We took on the jail, which doubled our assessment to the county from $620,000 to $1.2 million. And we lowered your taxes. How? It was allowed to develop. The mall was allowed to develop, and for 4 years, you saw your taxes go down and your services go up. What happened? Same reason we're here tonight. 4 years into it, we made a bad decision on a document, and we put a word moratorium in this town, and it stopped. Financially, this town has never caught back up. I'm asking the board, whatever direction you go to, nobody asked me to be here. I'm not gonna pick sides. How did we get here? We allowed the Highlands to grow in such a manner that they were allowed to phase in their project. But we also gave them a TIF for the municipal building that they bought from us for $1 million. A TIF that generated in 20 years of the bond for this building, that building, 4 miles of sidewalk and a new road, $9.2 million of that project, of that $16 million bond was paid for by the new development of the Highlands. Take that away from us, slow it down and stop it. We all like nice things, but it comes with a cost. Look at how much your town has not or has grown in assessed value in the last 15, 20 years. Look at struggles you're gonna have later on tonight when you talk about the impact of your budget. It's not just the increases of wages, insurance, fuel. It's because your town's not growing fast enough to maintain what you need to do, what you want to do, and what you wish to do. Now, there's some wish people out here that think in the next 5 to 10 years, you're gonna spend $27 million on a community center. Where's that money coming from? It's not coming from sidewalks, not coming from parks. This town needs to grow, and I agree with it. It needs to grow in the area that it's supposed to grow in. And that is the mall. That is the area. You don't need to push it out. But you can't have restrictions in this document, which however you finish it. My suggestion though is you need to get it to a town meeting so you can start implementing to see how much assessed value you can grow in this town. Because without new assessed values, you're not gonna be able to afford anything. We're seeing it. Okay, so when this document finally becomes official, however you people decide to get it there, these are the 3 basic questions you're gonna need. How much does it grow the assessed value in the town to allow us what we need to do, what we wish to do, and what we're dreaming about doing? And how does it get us there? Because without growing, again, we grew $100 to $120 million in 4 years, lowered your taxes, provided better services and more services. That didn't happen by mistake. It didn't happen by shell games. And I'm gonna leave you with some numbers. I know that this is a land use document. This land use document leads to assessed values. You take the many properties that the Highlands have bought in the years that the Highlands was allowed to develop. There's 3 TIFs. The original one, the Highland Greens, and the Village. Let's just concentrate on the first 2. When they bought that land and they started to develop, and it's a tool that's allowed in the comprehensive plan, and it should be allowed in your new draft. They took a piece of property that was assessed at the town at the time, $1.7 million. Anybody want to take a guess of what those lands are now? Give you a hint, about $330 million. What's your mill rate, around $15?
Well, we,
Okay, 12, let's make it 10.
we'll take 10.
I'm gonna give you 2. At $10, $360 million. That's 30 cents on your mill rate. Is that fair? Okay? Yeah, they get some of the money back, but they got to develop, and the town got to do things with it. So however you get to the finish line, the finished product has got to be able to allow this town to grow in a sensible way, to allow you to continue to put firefighters over there, police officers on the street, and allow you to maintain your equipment at a level of satisfaction. When I got on the board in 2004, we had 3 police cruisers. 2 of them had 240,000 miles on them, and the Volvo had 440,000 miles on them. And I'm not laughing about it because we were stealing parts from one to put it on the other to keep it running. Okay, we got a lot of wish things we like to do. Community centers, sidewalks, okay? Back in that development time, we did 5 miles of sidewalks for $1 million. We built a new Monument Place Road for $2.2 million. We did this whole project, $16.3 million, but $9 million of new revenue came from development. If you're gonna continue to grow your town and invest in your town, which I think you've done a pretty nice job, it's gotta take assessed values to do it. So as a former member, as a member of a family that still pays tax in here, a former member of a construction company I used to work for, you gotta get it done, you gotta get it done right. How you get there, that's why you get elected. You gotta get us to the finish line for a product that you can take to a town meeting that people can understand. And all you gotta do is ask yourself, how much assessed value does it take to increase just what the rate, the increase that you were asking for this year. Don't worry about the school and don't worry about the county. You're asking for 3 or 4%. Can you imagine if the town had grown by $40 million? You would have been asking for a flat rate increase for your municipal government. But as assessed value flattens, your expenses go up. What goes up with it? Your taxes. So this is, yes, it's a land use code. It's complicated. But you can make it very simple. Come up with a document that allows you to grow and allows these people to have the things they want, but you can afford it. Okay, because your $12.80 mill rate won't be $12.80 if you keep having to spend, having to invest, insurance goes up. We all know that the increases. The only way you're gonna keep your taxes down is you gotta grow your town. You're going in the right direction, but you owe it to the tax fee. You owe, and I'll be honest with you, you owe it to the business people. Okay, you only got X number of developers. I can tell you this, there's some out of town, out of state developers that looked in Topsham in the last 4 or 5 years that I know. Sorry, truth. We can't do that. We don't know what we're gonna get into. We don't wanna go through a planning board process that's gonna take 1.5 years to get approval. We don't know what the end results is, and we don't know if we're gonna be able to give enough to the community to make it worthwhile. It's out there. So please, stop this. Do what's right for the town, finish the product, be proud of it, and allow your town to grow. And I'm gonna say this. Don't become Brunswick. They're gonna be bankrupt. They can't afford to do anything. They're fighting amongst themselves, and I'm in the middle of it. But grow your town, and this is the tool that allows you to do it. So at the end of the day, if the document doesn't allow proper growth to increase your assessed value, I'm not sure if it's the correct document to take to town meeting. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, everybody.
Is there any other public comment?
You've got 2 online.
2 online. Let's take those. Let's start.
Rick Schultz and Dan Catlin.
Rick Schultz, Rick, if you wanna promote Rick to speak.
Yes, good evening. Hello, are we able to hear on that end?
Yes.
Excellent. So I apologize for not being there in person this evening. I have some family obligations I needed to attend to out of state, but I did want to just speak briefly, wearing actually 2 hats here tonight. One is the vice chair of CPIC committee, and then the other is as a resident taxpayer and licensed engineer. I've been involved in this committee for 6 years now. It has gone through a series of fits and starts and twists and turns. It has been a long process, and it has had a lot of unexpected and eye-opening. It's been quite an education on the code and the provisions and what this project has evolved to. This actually has been an interactive. It has been an effort and has input from planning board, from CPIC, from town members, developers, code enforcement, planning department. One of the things that I kind of pride myself on, I strive to be open-minded and weigh inputs from a lot of differing voices. Through this process, have I always agreed with the planning department comments? No. Have I agreed with developer comments? No. Have I agreed with CPIC comments? No. But it doesn't mean they were dismissed. There's been compromise. There's been back and forth. And I think, this is one of the crux that I'm taking away from this tonight is this document is in the draft phase. It is in the phase of being worked and vetted to get it to a point where it is a usable document and it is a compromise of the inputs from the various people. And I can't believe, we've had number of, targeted working sessions with developers. We've had, number of targeting sessions with planning staff, town council. I can't believe that, all that input does not have value to what we're doing here. And my take on this is the process may be broken, but let's fix or address the process rather than throwing out the provisions or the intent of what Recode was trying to do. Take it back to working sessions, interactive. I'd implore you to look at the latest CPIC meeting on January 12th is a great example of where feedback was taken from, the 99 Main Street concept, what was limiting it, what was preventing it, working through that and making edits to the draft code to address and work through. I would agree with the planning board, acid testing, some more development concepts, what could be possible, even some bad examples of, okay, if a poor development was proposed, would it be allowed to go through under Recode or current code? End of the day, I think the intent of Recode is to provide, some of the things that the last speaker just said. It is looking for more flexibility and more predictable development and more objective approval process versus subjective. The ability for developers to come in and if they, follow the provisions, follow the cookbook that's in Recode, address the provisions, then it makes for a more predictable approval process and, shorter development time. Yes, there's a learning curve. Yes, there is an educational piece involved in that. And yes, there will be things that are not perfect and there's, needs to be provisions for revision in the code. But, we thought this was a small project at the beginning. The more we dug into this, the more we explored how changing one section now conflicts another. And that conflict has a ripple effect on yet another provision of the code. This was not intended to be a comprehensive new code when we started, but the more we moved into the process, the more we were advised by consultants, code enforcement, planning staff that this is their vocation. This is their expertise. Said, well, we can't do just the Topsham Center provisions and still keep the old code because the two would be in conflict with each other and would create legal quagmire. So part of the hurdle we're facing is, it's almost, you can do, doing it piecemeal for 40 years has created a lot of overlapping and conflicting ideas, provisions within the current code, and trying to piecemeal that, may be very difficult to incorporate some of the changes, some of the provisions that are in the proposed recode. Putting on a different hat as the, as a resident taxpayer and engineer, we started off earlier in this meeting saying there's a lot of opportunities for volunteers, committee work, what better way to be involved in the town. And that involvement in the town through volunteer work, it's something that drew me to this town for the last 27 years that I've lived here. That was also over the last years, volunteer time from numerous individuals in the room tonight and throughout the town, that was provided in good faith without any indication of stopping, postponing, pausing the process, but often stepping backwards to accommodate input from various stakeholders. And I will also, now looking at, from a taxpayer point of view, those volunteer hours have intrinsic value to the town, along with the consulting fees, legal fees, which have been spent to date and will be spent moving forward, regardless of the decision we make here tonight. And as an engineer, I'm going to put my hat on. This is a lot to digest. It's a lot to comprehend, but all the codes, all the standards, all the guidelines that we've adopted in the state go through regular overhaul. But some of them as routine as 5 and 10 year cycles. It's been 40 years of amendments and patchwork. And I would just caution continuing down that road with amendments and patchwork could be a significant undertaking versus ripping the Band-Aid off and starting clean. So, like I said, I'm all for predictable and objective growth. I think we just need to address some of the process and some of the communication, and yes, get this to a form that can be understood by the general public. So, thank you.
Thank you, Rick. We're going to Dan Catlin next. Yeah, I think your mic is on mute.
How's that?
We got you now.
Okay. Hey, thanks. Hey, there's a little video too.
Bonus.
My name's Dan Catlin. I'm a local guy. I've lived in the area for 66 years now, and I on the board of TDI. Although I'm here tonight as a Topsham Fair Mall owner and developer, and I joined the International Council of Shopping Centers about 25 years ago, and I've run around the country basically doing economic development here in the state of Maine and New Hampshire for shopping centers that we've owned from Waterville to Littleton, New Hampshire. So I do a lot of representation of national tenants. And Jimmy Truziani, I mean, like, that's some great history. And I think I'm going to watch that again when I get a few minutes, because he had a lot of facts and figures there. But I was just jotting some stuff down. And I was thinking, does anybody remember back in, I guess it was 96, when Bradley's went dark and the middle stores were 40% vacant? That's almost 30 years ago, or it is 30 years ago. And that's when I came on the board, or actually on board, with Bruce and Joanne Allen. It was probably the most important cup of coffee I ever had in my life at McDonald's with those two. They really became like second parents to me. But I worked with Bruce when he was alive, and it was a great partnership. And as Kurt Newfield has said at TDI several times, you can look at the history of the Topsham Fair Mall. Look at the original Hannaford Plaza that was really built as only a neighborhood grocery store. And now the Topsham Fair Mall is a regional shopping center. And when I'm lucky enough to get somebody in my car that's a decision maker, and we drive Brunswick, Topsham, Main Street, that triangle. Topsham's close to the highway, and Topsham, the ordinance is, look at the results. I think it's worked great over the last 25 years. Now, what I'm seeing nationwide is what we call a lifestyle center. And, that's part of some of the definition that Susan was talking about tonight. And that's exactly what I proposed and did elevations for 99 Main Street, which, Topsham doesn't really have a Main Street with those car dealerships, that gas station. And my vision is to try to put a building in there where people could meet, people can live, and maybe have a couple food uses with patios that would be just off the sidewalk. That's what I was hoping for. When I went to all these workshops, I sat through them, and I, among my day job, spent a lot of time going through that 180 pages. And after several workshops, I said, hey, I'm in this every day, but I need some help. And I turned to Chris Belanger and I said, Chris, I'm going to pay you. You need to do a couple of case studies for us. And one was Goodwill and residents of Park Drive that I'm now building out. We're on our first building, and, I got 3 years of permitting that project. And, and then 99 Main Street. Well, I'll start with Goodwill first. And it just, I couldn't get away from the fact that, they were kicking me out of the retail zone and making me, non-conforming after Goodwill went out there on their own 24 years ago. And we cleared a lot and put in that store. And they've paid taxes all this time. And I asked Chris, I went back to him, I said, Chris, if Goodwill wants to build an addition and go 4,000 square feet closer to Park Drive, or if they need a new loading dock under the new ordinance, can I do that? And they took out the planned commercial district. And with those guidelines, I'm being told that I'm non-conforming. I can keep what I have, but I can't increase it. And I think that's unfair. And I haven't heard one complaint in 25 years about that Goodwill store. So go to the other side of the parking lot, and I've got 4 buildings going up for somewhere around $22 million, 80 units. And another part of the ordinance talks about the timing. So my permit's only good for so long. And I asked in one of the planning board workshops, because no one quite knows how they're going to interpret the code on timing. But basically, if I wasn't in the ground with one of those foundations, I could risk losing that particular building. So, I just, I feel like that, talk about unfair, that's unfair. And not to mention, when Bruce Allen did, he got me into this. Because when he did Monument Place with Rich Rodner, we were having lunch at Pub 99 one day. And he says, now listen, Sonny, he says, I'm going to buy this front lot and I'm going to do this deal with this appliance store, but I got 27 acres behind this. And he says, I'm going to sell it to you. And I'm like, oh, no, I don't need anything else to do. What am I going to do with that? And, you know, we tried some affordable housing there. And, you know, one of my sister companies, they've got 11,000 units in 27 states. Well, I got to tell you, I tried that for years. It didn't work. And I went to Maine State Housing and they said, hey, the company you're affiliated with and your partner is part of, they do it better than we do. Go see them. So one of the things that hasn't even been talked about in this 188 pages is how this pencils and how I go to a bank and borrow enough money to get this done. And, you know, that takes me to Chris's second case study, 99 Main Street. And, you know, I don't know if all of you have seen that building, but I thought that was a sweet building. 3 stories of residential, 15,000 square feet of retail. 3 years ago, I was real close to a letter of intent for a smaller grocery store that you guys would have loved. You know, not on anywhere near the scale of an 80,000 square foot Market Basket. After Chris got done with now over 80 hours of work, he came back to me and he said, yeah, you know, you can probably keep the 15,000 square feet, but you went from 88 units down to 44 units under the new code. Well, I don't have to tell you, having the 88 units was going to help me subsidize the 15,000 square feet of retail, which was the hardest part of that equation. So anyway, I think one of the biggest problems here, and I mean, if you ever took this to a vote, I can't stress enough that I've talked with several of the developers, my other associates on CPIC, and some different folks that are looking at other different parcels in town. And they're like, oh my word, oh, I can't get my arms around this. It's just too much to get your arms around. And if I had a wish and it could be granted, it would be for CPIC to pick out, you know, maybe 3 chapters that mean the most to them, and then concentrate on those 3 chapters, not trying to change the ordinance that's worked so well for the last 30 years in the Topsham Fair Mall, and change it so that we become non-conforming at Goodwill, and we go from 88 units and 15,000 square feet down to 15,000 square feet and 44 units. So anyway, I think the other thing that I would do as a board, and no disrespect to anybody, because I got to tell you, you know, everybody's put a tremendous amount of work into this, and I take my hat off to all the board members of CPIC and town staff. And listen, they got everyone's interest at heart, and I know they're trying, but it's not going to work for me. And I got to tell you, Chris, we were at sketch plan approval. We put a sewer line in for $100,000 before the paving was done on Main Street. I paid my $80,000 of sewer fees to the sewer district. We were ready to go back. And Chris was like, hey, do you want me to submit this plan? Let's go back. Let's get the permit. And I'm like, Chris, this is not the days when I started, when you'd give Charlie Wazinski $30,000 and get a permit. In Park and Drive, I've got almost $400,000 in soft costs. So I wasn't going to take the chance of putting that kind of money into 99 Main Street and then have the zoning change and take this hit. So you guys got to get this worked out, because it's not only me, but I get calls all the time from different retailers that are coming into the state of Maine. A lot of them now are national medical folks, which I think we get an aging population. Everybody would be ecstatic for. And, the first thing they want to know is, what's the zoning look like? And I take a right into McDonald's, and I don't get to Sharon Williams before they're saying, hey, what's the zoning? How hard is it going to be to get a permit here? So anyway, if you could do one thing, I would hope. You've got some real talent in this town, and it's certainly not me, but I got to tell you, you got Kurt Newfield, who is a Topsham resident, who's on TDI, and you got Chris Belanger, an Augusta guy that is developed the Highlands for 30 plus years. Those guys are the experts. And, if you could get Chris to come and visit with you and have him tell you, don't listen to me, have him tell you, how handicapped Goodwill's going to be, what could potentially happen to residences at Park Drive that we just got permitted and just started building, and what is the penalty for 99 Main Street. I mean, I'd just like you guys to hear it from him. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen.
New people only, new people only. It's just, there are two things that need correcting, but look, new people only making it. I don't have the name. I don't think this is-
Here, your mic is, oh, there you go.
Hi. Continue. Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't be there tonight. I'm dealing with some health issues, and I just didn't think I would have the stamina. I'll try to be brief. I know it's been a long night. I'm coming in. I'm Kurt Newfield. I'm 14 Mary Meeting Drive. I'm a resident. I work with Jim Howard, who owns development business down at the Lower Village, and a lot of what I was going to say has been said. I'll just echo a little bit of it. The process has been long. The communications were a little challenging. We stopped going to some of the meetings, and I'd like to say right now, even reviewing it, as I started to last week, the copy of the draft that's online is from April of 2024, and I have no doubt that I could have reached out and gotten a more recent copy by email. But I think it's a little indicative of whether or not some of the comments are getting in. Of course, I'm with Andy Sturgeon on formerly of TDI, and he says that there's been a lot of good work, and I don't doubt it. But it is a lot. It's 180 pages that you have to get through. So rather than reiterate what Dan just said, I'll just say that from our perspective, in my job, I do have to evaluate parcels for potential projects that we would do. I looked at one in Standish that was in a zone that had a fairly prescriptive and form-based code. And even though the planner was really helpful and said, these are the things we've learned about this code that are challenging to meet, and we will help you with the workarounds so you can do your project on this parcel. And we've had to do this with other things. And so here's a planner who's telling us how to get through the code that they adopted so we could do our project. At the end of the day, we passed on that parcel. And here we are a couple of years later, we've moved out to a different parcel in Standish because we'd like to have a Rusty Lantern Market there. This location is further away from other businesses. It's outside of the utility zone, so we're gonna have to be on well and septic. And we're gonna have to do a lot of offsite improvements, but that's necessary because the form-based code just didn't seem workable to us in Standish. So that's an example, that I've personally been through. And then I also want to say that same parcel is vacant. It's vacant to this day, and the area adjacent to and behind it, that I understand somebody was looking at a project there the same time we were, obviously did not move forward. So I think, yes, challenging code, boy, if you work through it, it might be a great product at the end. But as somebody who works for developers and has for 20 years, 25 years in Maine, they'll go to the next town, or they'll go maybe somewhere else in town. And as Jim Trusiani said, we would lose that opportunity to develop it and continue to diversify our tax base. So I just want folks to be aware that trying to fit the proposed ordinances into our current ordinances could have unintended consequences. And I think that the recommendation or this comments by the planning board that can we take the best parts of the recode and put it into our current ordinances it's got merit. As we develop the lower part of the Topsham Fair Mall with better architectural codes, we've got a better product. And down there by Target and some of those lower areas with the better landscaping plans, the better architectural input, very good input from the planning board. Our lower village is very attractive with the little houses, dentistry offices that look like houses, all done on our current code, all done with great architect and planning board feedback to develop nice character. So I just want to add that. I don't want to belabor the point, but I will just again reinforce some of the things that the landowners and the developers are saying from the engineering side, that I think it would really have a dampening effect on development to try to implement it as is. So thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Is there anybody else on there? Anybody else in the audience that would like to make public comment for the first time? Okay, before, I know we have a couple of speakers that want to come back up, but I want to just address that real quick before we do that. Normally it's, you come up and you speak your piece and that's it. This is a big topic and this is a lot of information, so I understand, and I think it's important that we allow everybody to get everything out in tonight's meeting. But I would like to remind everybody that this is not a back and forth type of conversation or a he said, she said type of conversation. And in the interest of time, I would like, if we're making second comments, to make sure that we don't repeat points. We've heard a lot tonight. We don't need to keep dragging on and beating a dead horse, if you will. And I would also like to say that I would like to limit it to 5 minutes for this second time around, because we still have to have our conversation as well. And I'm taking a lot of notes.
I'll run time.
Okay, thank you.
I'll take a pass.
Okay.
Hopefully I'll take less than 5 minutes. Just two things that Dan Catlin mentioned. It could have been easily missed in what I had said before. He raised up Goodwill on Park Drive. Retail is going to be allowed there. That will not be non-conforming. The other thing is, after we sat through the workshop where Kurt Neufeld said, if we could use the general building, we will have our 80 units. Dan just said, the way we'll recode is we could only get 44 units. Not the case. We heard him. We made that change. The general building can be used at 99 Main across the street, not in the front on the road, but in the back where he wants residential units. He said, if you do that, I will get my density, my units. He's got it. Now, you know, one of the things about the cost of development is when there's clarity, I mean, I think Rick talked about that, that the time is money. And when when the process is clear and unambiguous, that's a predictable, it's a much more predictable process. So the two things, oh, here's the thing. Kurt talked about the last draft being April 2024. One of the things we're trying to do, and we've done this in conjunction with town staff who are budget conscious, we want to conserve the town's budget. If we had the consultants changing every little thing, it would cost a mint. We are trying to accumulate the changes that seem to be important and giving them to the consultants so that a new draft comes out all at once. That's much more cost efficient. None of us are happy at the time this is taking, none of us. But we are trying to do it in a way that is conserving taxpayer money. We do need to find a way to get the word out more quickly about the changes being made. And I hear that point.
Thank you. Final chance?
All right, this will be real fast.
Please state your name, Patty.
Don Span, Patty, Chairman Planning Board. This is the document. This was not developed by Julie Erdman. It was developed by Tom Lister, and it was after a meeting I had with him on July 15th, 2025. So it's very recent. The first evidence of any of the non-conformings being changed is a 12-1 memo that was delivered to the planning board on 3/6. So that's just facts, right? Secondly, as I mentioned, when we did get that memo, I've asked Chris if he could take a look at it. And Danny gave him permission to do that. And Chris is going to get back to us and tell us what he thinks, and does it in fact do what you just heard it is being stated it does. So I guess I would defer to the civil engineer to make that decision or make that determination. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Are we taking more?
I was gonna make a comment to start us off, but you can go ahead and start us off.
I just wanted to say thank you for everyone who's in the audience tonight, because this is what we want in our community. Interest in filling this place with people giving their opinions. So I want to commend you for coming and being a part of this evening. You should be commended for that.
Thank you. All right, before we begin our conversation, part of my notes was to do the same. Thank you guys for all of your comments. It's very clear that everybody has put a lot of time and effort into their thoughts, their time and effort getting us to this point where we're at today. And it does not go unnoticed. And I think it's important that we as a select board take that diligence very seriously for ourselves, because a lot of time has gone into this. There has been a lot of information that has gone out tonight. If you did make a public comment tonight and you prepared documents, it might be helpful to the board if you would email that to us, so that we can also decipher through a lot of this stuff. There's no way that we can remember everything that you've said and everything that you guys have done over the past 5 years. Most of us are apprised of that information as we sit in these seats and we go through it, but it would be helpful for that. To the board, I would just say during our conversations, there were multiple views on this topic tonight, and I think it's important to realize our job here on this board is to look at everything from every perspective. And despite our own beliefs, we need to keep an open mind and with the residents held in the highest regard for this decision, because I personally don't think it's a decision that we can make lightly. We have to put our thoughts in, and we really have to do our diligence to make sure that we get the best result for the town. all perspectives from everybody that has spoken tonight. I do want to say has probably come from a place of good intent. I don't think anybody in this room wants to see Topsham fail. We all want to see Topsham become the best community, better than it is already, and the best in the state. We all believe that. That's why we're all here tonight. And it's important that we understand that. Tonight there were a few contradictions of points that we need to have discussions about. And it is important that we do discuss it. So with that, I would like to open up the discussion.
I just want to say on the record that this is a daunting task for us. Volunteers have spent hours of their time on both sides trying to make the town of Topsham a better place. Whether it be through recode or whether it be through the planning board knowledge and experience. You know, I think everyone's trying to do what they think is best. If we continue with CPIC and don't continue with the planning board, then that's a win-lose. If we continue with the alternate plan, that's a win or lose. And I'd like to see us come up somehow with a win-win situation. I saw in one of the documents it said, staff would like the planning board to be engaged in the process, but acknowledges that they cannot force to be engaged. Similarly, the CPIC would need to be engaged in the alternate process, and they cannot be forced to engage in it. My understanding is the select board actually creates the charges for these committees, and maybe that's what we need to do is charge you guys to work together to come up with a plan that I have heard over and over again, that it needs to be understandable by the layperson and not just this complicated document that no one really knows what's happening. So I think that we risk losing residents if our tax fees keep going up and up and up, and then businesses aren't gonna come because we won't have the residents. I think it's gonna end up being a lose-lose. We need to have new businesses. We need to attract businesses to come in here if we are gonna survive in this balance of residential taxes and the help of business taxes coming in. And so, do I have the answer? No. I don't know at this point. I'm not gonna pretend that I have the expertise. I'm not a planner. I don't have that expertise, but I think that we need to simplify the process, not have it go on for years and years and years, and see what we can set deadlines and timelines, and maybe that means more than one meeting a month. Maybe that means let's get this done. I don't think that we're gonna make a decision tonight, that's my opinion. I'm thinking that this probably needs to be tabled as far as the decision and see how we can move forward with teamwork and get this where it needs to be. I'm not sure, you know? I mean, we certainly don't want to eliminate the CPIC committee, and we certainly don't want to eliminate planning and, you know, those are not the options here. I feel a little bit like, you know, was it King Solomon who said, cut the baby in half? And, you know, we certainly don't want to do that. So, that's my opinion.
I would agree that something that's been worked on for 4, 5, 6 years now, we can't make a decision in an hour. You know, it's something that has to be discussed and digested and weigh out pros and cons, and I would agree that we'll probably need to sit on this for a bit. Whether we have future meetings, what, but it's a lot to take in.
I can't disagree. I would also argue at the same point that we have a conversation tonight to get the ball rolling with our thoughts, with where we kind of are questioning things. If there's anything that we can get out now tonight publicly, that would probably be the best benefit, although I would agree that I think tabling it is a good choice, just so that we can all do our diligence beyond tonight. It's too big of a decision to make a decision this evening alone, but let's get the party started and let's have a conversation to start it. I have a few thoughts. Mike, do you have anything that you wanna?
Well, I wish they just told whatever, nothing, you know.
Okay,
Everything I want to be dark with the for me, digest that.
Yeah.
So I think
You asked that already, we'll have that.
Okay, great. You have any thoughts? that you wanna-
Yeah, I hope that there's a way we can get through some of this. He said, she said, in the bickering, I guess, for lack of a better term. And we need to, whether we have joint meetings or whatever that is. We need to do something to get by this fighting and the conspiracy theories and the making accusations, but that's to me, non-productive, and we need to get by that and get it done.
My thoughts, I'm gonna zoom out just a little bit on this process and look at the work that's been done from strictly volunteers. Planning board is volunteers, CPIC is volunteers. The only people that are paid are the planning department and the people that work for the town. What I'm seeing from a zoomed out lens, and this may be a feeling that you guys agree with or not, but what I'm feeling is that there just seems to be a lack of alignment between all the parties that are involved. And it seems like there might be multiple different visions that are trying to get to the same outcome. And that's just kind of not aligned right now. What we will think about and discuss is how do we help better align and provide leadership to those departments and to those volunteers to support them and find what you're describing as a win-win. I think it's important that we do find that win-win. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I do think we need to find some kind of alignment, both on the way we do the work and also the vision or the end goal, how we get there, what that vision looks like. We also, I think, have heard multiple different comments just from the back and forth of the different perspectives, but I do feel that we need to remind committees and boards about how transparency is what rules this place. We need to be utterly transparent about everything we do. Everything that we do is for the town of Topsham. That's who we serve. That's everything that we make for a decision is based on that. And it should be, despite what our beliefs are. And that transparency means how do we run our meetings? How do we conduct ourselves in those meetings? And what rules we follow or what bylaws we follow. And that does mean keeping minutes and doing things like following the pseudo Robert's rules of order of how we conduct different things. It's important that we do that for the people of the town. Again, that's who we serve. The question is, from my perspective, how do we align the changes? And this is the thought that we have to go through. How do we align the changes to the proposed code? Kind of what was the code for versus what is the code going to be now? How can we align these? I mean, there's a big gap right now and we're pretty far apart. We need to get these things a little bit closer together. And the final thing that I want to note is I heard a lot about development and how that helps bring tax bases down. And I cannot disagree with that because it does bring in a significant tax base for the town. But we cannot forget the people of Topsham at the same time, and we need balance. We need to have balance between the commercial and the residential growth of this town. Because if we grow too quickly, this is my personal feeling and I'll leave it at that. But if we grow too quickly on the commercial side, who are we gonna hire to work here? Because they can't afford to live here. And where are they gonna come from? And with Topsham where it's at, our houses are very expensive. Our taxes and property valuations are going higher and higher. It's harder to get new families or young families to come into this to help support our school district. We have an aging population. Topsham is one of the oldest towns in the state and the oldest county in the state. And we need to help bring balance through the vision of Topsham to help create a space that residential development and commercial development live in kind of harmony. So those are my zoomed out big picture thoughts. What we kind of have to do now is really dive back into the zoomed in version and get through that. Again, I don't think that's gonna be done today, but we can take a motion to table it now. We can bring up other thoughts that we want to discuss. But I would leave that up to you guys.
I think there's been a problem with communications, I heard one tonight, just the example, the goodwill. One says you can't do it, he says that's not changed. Someone's not communicating.
And that's the big part why I wanted to get all this information, because I did hear a few contradictions this evening as well, and it's hard for me to say who's right, everybody's telling their side, and we were listening to that, but we have to get down to which side is the more accurate side.
I think I can probably answer that one. Yeah. I have not been to every meeting of both groups. I've been to a number of meetings of both groups or watched things. I know that both sides are willing to work, or at least had been willing to work with each other. I remember a meeting like 3 years ago when Dan Catlin and John Larson said, you know, the problem with putting all the buildings fronts right up, say, in Topsham Mall, in front of the parking lots, is we're not gonna go get national retailers that wanna do this because they want the parking in front of the store, not behind. And then when everyone saw what happened with Market Basket, I know it changed the minds of some of the people at CPIC. They're like, oh, maybe there's ways with good landscaping that we don't necessarily have to be. I also know there was talks of people at CPIC when either Chris Belanger's stuff came forward or Dan Catlin made comments and said, you know, I don't know if we want to make Park Drive no longer available to retail, but yeah, that kind of makes sense. I think you were exactly right when you said this communication stuff, and I think it's because they haven't been together enough. So I don't think we need to spend a lot of time necessarily trying to read things to figure out who's right. I think you're right, the communication hasn't been there, and I think this is just my opinion, although I think I can say it's not just me, but staff. We need to find a way to get everyone together, working together, and that keeps the communication on the same page. If we have parallel processes, we're not gonna get anywhere. So that's what I'll say to that. Thank you.
Should we entertain a motion?
I wanna speak to that first. I think, there was a proposed motion that I think we should modify. I don't like the motion that was in here. It was like, can we work with, this original motion, was suggested. I'd like to run a possible motion by the team before I actually make it. And it would just say, move to table this item until a May meeting. And in the interim, direct the town manager to inquire of the planning board and the CPIC committee as to whether any and all of its members are willing to engage in a win-win solution to bring together the code and planning vision. That sound reasonable, or is that outside of, because it was really looking at whether we want to go with the alternate or the other one. I don't want to pick side. I don't want to pick side in my motion. I want to say, can we do this together?
What we can do is, you can make the motion and we can get it seconded, start into discussion. And if an amendment wants to be made, you can accept the amendment to that motion or not accept the amendment. And then as it's done from the person bringing the motion up, we would vote on that final motion. And if it doesn't pass, we can do no, or if it does pass, it'll be what it is.
Okay.
Mark, that's for the problem with the too many meetings, the planning board has too much on their plate, that they have time with feedback, or the low way, right? Is the planning board might have 2 meetings, they have to leave this one, or not?
I think this is, as a number of people said, a daunting process.
Very long.
And it's gonna take extra resources and devotion on everyone's part. And probably would take extra meetings, yes.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and make the motion.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Patty, just so you know, this motion has changed. Move to the table this item until a May meeting, and in the interim, direct town manager to inquire of the planning board and the CPIC committee as to whether any and all of its members are willing to engage in a win-win solution to blend recode and the planning vision.
Okay, we have a motion from Ann Callahan. Is there a second?
I'm not checking that one.
Okay, seconded by Mike Labby. We are now in discussion. Do you have anything that you want to discuss about that motion? It's tabling the topic until May and trying to find a resolution to win-win scenarios.
Might be a time when we start talking to each other and see if we got more time to it.
Yeah, I would just encourage all those involved to be receptive to everybody's thoughts and whatever, and not be, you know, we need to do, like you said, what's in the best interest of the town. And to have this division, it's just, you know, we can have more meetings, but if it's gonna be a fight, then it's gonna be pointless. So we need to truly set aside whatever differences may or may not be there and get through this.
Do you want in that motion anything related to work that we should be doing independently to make sure that we're bringing our best effort?
Are you talking about select board?
Yes.
Well, we're already gonna get all of the information and the presentations that we have to read through ourselves. I'm assuming that we're gonna be included in future meetings. I think that we would want at least representation in future meetings.
I personally attend the planning board meetings, but not in this capacity, just as a learning and observation, but I don't know if that's an option for us to participate or however, whatever
I don't
I
think
don't know what
it's,
the directive would be.
I don't think there's participation in those. It's more, like you said, observation. You can make public comment as a resident of the town.
I think, I was just gonna say, I think that this motion as was written was just to have the town manager engage with both teams and to come up with a plan, like how can we resolve this? It wasn't to give them specific tasks, it was like, they have to come up with what they need to do, I would guess.
Is that feasible for you, Mark, to engage with that?
Certainly feasible to engage, but I don't know whether there's something in between. You know, there's certainly continuing with the present recode, and there's doing the idea of picking some smaller amount of items and trying to change the present code. But I think it's certainly worth having the discussion with we could convene the chair and vice chair of each group, and we can brainstorm and see, maybe this something in between them. Or maybe there's enough communication to get open up between the two that the group agrees this is the way we want to go, so.
It concerns me to hear people say that businesses don't wanna come here because it's too difficult. That's a problem.
And I hear that myself.
That's a problem. That's a big problem.
And probably the biggest problem right now is having this hanging out there. So I think we will certainly take your motion, act on it, and see if we can figure out a path.
We'll be voting on the motion. All in favor? Okay, it is unanimous. We will table this until May. And I would urge all of us to take this as, I'm gonna say it again, but to take it seriously and put our best efforts forward. To try to come up with the best way for the best solution for the best town in the state. All right. Thank you, guys.
We still have more.
Can I interrupt?
Yes,
Could I
Wendy.
quickly interrupt? Could I ask Don Span to send me his comments or to send me the whole slide so that I can look at it, because I didn't catch everything.
Sounds
And,
great. He's nodding yes. He'll send that right over. Thank you.
Okay, and
Something, did you, hey Patty, or if
Yeah.
not, because we're not done with the meeting. But I think you would have a rather daunting task if you tried to summarize what everyone said tonight. So I would like the board's opinion on, I'm thinking, Patty, keep it very brief, because we've got the video, that's an ultimate recording. Yeah, exactly. So just do a few highlights of each person. Don't feel like you have to try to 15 minutes speech somebody.
so keep it brief so they can't go back and say, well, you said this and you said
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
That's, okay, yeah, well, fine.
Take her 2 weeks to transcribe.
I'm gonna quit. Thank you.
Wanna go? You gonna talk to anybody? You can stay, I'm just
One
joking.
thing I wanted to clarify, recode means, revision of zoning code.
There's a complete
It's not
rewrite.
really defined.
Wait a second, it's a complete rewrite of the zoning. It's been, I should probably read it up to right, something.
Okay, it was never actually fundamentally defined in all the stuff, but I just wanted to.
We're not in executive session.
Okay.
We can still go.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Oh, okay. I think they think it's an executive session. So, yeah, you should be, so.
Yeah, we are.
You know, the.
Yeah, sure. Okay, let's move on. Great conversation, by the way. We are on 26-29. Consideration and any appropriate action regarding a notice about opportunities for input into town, MSAD 75 and county budgets, which will affect the fall 26 property tax bills.
I took, just to give us a starting point, I took the comments at the meeting, trying to put together basically something to raise people's awareness, get that to our page. And then the vice chair came up with another version. The only thing I caution is we're due to give it to the printer by midday tomorrow. So we're gonna be hard pressed to make a lot of changes, but certainly can make changes, or if you don't like it at all, we'll take it out.
I like it. I think it's important that we send something out, and just to clarify the points that when I sent in a document, it was a very rough, my thoughts on paper. And it was more or less to articulate the idea that an educational model is helpful, because going through this process and attending school board and their finance committee meetings and the budget advisory committee for the county and our finance committee meetings, they're all very different. They're all very different processes. They're all different times. They have different votes, different structures. And I'm not convinced that many people really understand it. And so when I created the piece that you guys saw that was added in, it really was more about how do we inform our residents in this town about the process? Because what we get at the end of the day is, well, Justin gets it, the phone calls, why is my taxes going up? And it's too late. You know, we can explain why, but it's too late. We need people to engage in the process. Tonight was a great example of why. So that was why I had put that there. It was more about, this is how MSAD 75 does their budgeting process. Here's their proposal. This is how the county does it. Here's their proposal. Here's how the town does it. Here's our proposal. Here's all the increases. Here's also the dates. I think Mark's version pretty much captures a lot of that, and it's probably the smartest thing because it's really all ready to go, and we need it by tomorrow morning. But I think
Do
this
you
is,
have the dates for those names?
It's the only date you can have is May 12th. This is what really looks like it would be our version. Answer one, or at least the forward.
and I would add that as we boost into this transparency model, I mean, Topsham's very good about it anyway, but as we move forward, maybe the idea of informing our population about the process is vital, and it is important. So maybe this is an idea that we can have when we get into another fiscal year. How can we start that fiscal responsibility by informing the people, having a little bit of a campaign to do so? The goal is to try to get more people to participate. We have a very old form of government in town hall, in town meeting. And I think it's vital that we institute the town hall, the town meeting, where people come out and we make it event. We make it an event again, where it used to be everybody came, can't have 9,500 plus people there, but we can get more than 50. So
And to your point, there's a lot of people who don't even understand how the town operates.
That's right.
When I was talking about select board people, like, what is that? They don't even know. And so I think this is great to say, here's the process and here's how you
So
be part of it.
Yeah.
And then not just a shock at the mailbox when you open that.
Yeah. And I think that's the step that we can discuss some later time, but that was my thoughts. That's why that second draft came out. But what we need to do is make the decision and vote on this first one because it's due tomorrow morning. And then we're
I'm
gonna make,
prepared to do a motion.
let's go for it.
I make a motion to issue a notice about the opportunities for input into the town MSA 75 and county budgets, which will affect the fall 26 property tax bill.
Okay, we have a motion by Ann Callahan. Do we have a second? Seconded by Dave Kenny. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's unanimous in favor of.
And your comment about out there being called for taxes? I can come the street all the time with that. We're in tax this year. Already getting it.
You're not doing it.
That's why I should explain it, right? Like the butter explains it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Pass that out there. There you go. All right, moving on to item 26-30. Consideration and any appropriate action on appointing a select board member to attend with the town manager G0402 NIM/ICS overview for senior and appointed officials. This is necessary training to be eligible for FEMA reimbursement for future events.
In the essence of time, I make a motion to appoint, Mike Maggie.
We have a motion by Ann Callahan. We have a second?
I'll second that.
Look at that.
Well, my question was, I think we had discussed, and you said anybody can go.
Anybody.
You could have more than one if you.
So I may elect to go to that,
Sure.
if that's okay as well.
I'm sure they'd be happy to.
And we have a second by Dave Kenny.
Sir.
And any discussion?
I think it's gonna be,
Seeing,
I will enjoy this, I've done this for, the National 98, the female representatives, all that, so. I look forward to this one.
that's great news. Okay, seeing no more discussion, all in favor? It is unanimous in favor of. Okay, moving on to the addition of our agenda this evening.
It doesn't have a time on it. We could find the time. And what was the thing from?
H12.
Okay, 26-32. Consideration and any appropriate action to request from the History Committee to provide a letter to the Bridge Advisory Committee on naming process for the new Topsham Brunswick Bridge.
So the history committee, wanted to do a letter to support a name, and then because of our policy on external communications, they need to get it approved by you first. So we got it up, we added the agenda, or Friday, get the materials, though, we actually formally added tonight. In the interim, we got a call from Mr. Bennett that served on the Bridge Advisory Committee, and he said they had met and they discussed and they wanted to use the same name. And they wrote some correspondence which got added to your materials that they would like to ask the Brunswick and Topsham Select Board to use the same name. You could do a number of things tonight. One would be simply just tell the History Committee you're okay with it, if you are. Another might be you could weigh in and make a decision tonight. Another, which might be probably a better public process, is you could set a deadline for people to suggest names and then look at this at a future meeting and then make a recommendation after you let people have a chance to go into it.
Wasn't the discussion earlier about having a screen with content on that? The name of the bridge and stuff like that?
And ultimately,
I remember hearing something about that.
ultimately, it's the state that chooses.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if we wanted
We
to
get some correspondence from I think it was a student, wasn't it?
No, that's for having a dedication.
Dedication, okay.
Name also, but it's, I agree.
But for the naming, it's the state that chooses, so I don't know if we wanna have a contest for the state's thing. This is more, what do you wanna weigh in and make a recommendation? If so, how do you determine what you wanna recommend?
And we recommend, don't matter Brunswick, two names.
If you come from this side, it's called that. If you go.
Topsham Brunswick.
Yeah,
What was called that before, the Topsham Brunswick?
No, the Brunswick Topsham, but we'll change it to Topsham.
Topsham Brunswick versus
I know, I don't have an issue with their suggestion, but I also fear that if we don't have the public have some type of input, we may get grief as well, so I don't know if maybe your suggestion is I'm on board with to give them maybe a timeline, say any suggestions, and then obviously.
Now, I deal with Brunswick, I go.
Well, wait.
you're kind.
Well, it's a.
Well, it's a joint, it's joint, I mean, we are neighbors, we gotta be good neighbors, so my thought is. It's hard to make a decision on one name. we've been presented with one idea, one name. I'm not saying it's a bad one. It's a good one. I like the way they presented it with the information and the history and justifications. I personally would just like to see more options of names because there's other people that may have great history and great stories to tell about why they would name it something else. And then I think that would give us a better option. So maybe if there's other names that the history committee can come up with, or we have the town, if anybody has a name that they want to come up with,
Sturgeon Place.
we. I would recommend though, if we do accept other options, we make a deadline for it, so that we're not.
It doesn't need to get out.
Well, I think that we're kind of going overboard here because we have no authority to name this bridge. It is the legislature that gets to name it, and they only make recommendations. And going through this process, the history committee has done the history on, what was, happening at this site. But then somebody was telling us, you did, right, was talking about, someone said they never heard it called that.
Yeah, I had talked to some people that they had never heard that term,
And they've been here
Jeff's
for
Falls,
8
and
years.
I'm not saying I'm against it by any means, but it's just a term that some of the people that have been there forever have never heard of.
Well, I've heard it called before, but
And it's, yeah,
not further river.
but I worry that having the name of Jeff's kid was specific to Topsham and not Brunswick. We need something that perhaps we can share, I don't know.
When you put a name, if Old Town goes with one name, we'll get it passed, but if you don't.
So-
They get named, right, they are, we're gonna tell them.
So
It's already named, the name of Franklin Bridge right now. All the signs saying.
That's a different-
Franklin Bridge open. No, it's not Franklin Bridge open.
I'm just, and I'll say this publicly, I'm worried about putting somebody's name on it, that we've seen what's going on.
Well, that's not a bad name, but with the farmer that came over that bridge.
I'm talking about other parts of the
But
country.
we just don't wanna get into that.
We know if we went to ST Island.
Too long part of.
I was trying to.
Remind, this is live television.
do we want to open up the name suggestions and keeping in mind that all we can do is suggest what we wanna call it? We don't have the authority to actually name the bridge, but should we open this up to the public for naming as well, or just anybody in general? If the committee wants to do it and we have entries come in to us, and then we basically can have our conversation about which one, and we can have a night where everybody comes in and pleads their case and let American Idol.
Or maybe or halfway between the two is, maybe don't actually ask people, suggest a bunch of names, just order a public hearing before you make your decision. So that someone feels strongly they'll bring another name.
Have you had any discussion with the Brunswick officials on what they're?
I haven't, but this committee, this bridge advisory committee that also wants this
Sound like
name
they did.
is a mixture of both towns and has been working on this process for
So
10
this name
years.
came out of both sides.
This came out of them as well as our history.
Okay.
I personally wanted to say, let's go with it. And not make it into a bigger task. They did all the research, they did all the history, nobody thought to even come up with asking people. And now they're saying, we've done the history, we've got Brunswick did it, isn't there a letter that says Brunswick on the side?
Both Brunswick Council and you to adopt that name. So you could just say, we wanna have a public hearing before we make the decision. And then if you get a bunch of people coming to meetings and we wanna call something else, maybe give you pause. If you don't get people coming, then you decide, let's just go with.
And if Brunswick doesn't agree, it's not gonna go anyway.
Now, and the public hearing can be good, except if we postpone the hearing to a later date, like a month from now, then we get all these options, and then we have to take another amount of time to digest it all. Versus maybe opening it up, throwing in all the signs, send us your names, you have until this date to where they can come in and be submitted, so we can look at it before that next meeting.
If you have, 50 people that submit names and one is taken, then you're gonna have 49 people that are upset.
Yes.
Why are we doing that to ourselves or to people? I'm not so sure. I mean, if somebody really had a strong feeling about wanting to name the bridge, they could come to us, right? They could have come to.
That's the just
They should all know that it's going on.
Yeah, it's just about that, the model that
I agree with the fact that we don't want
I
to
just,
get this too big.
I don't either, and I don't want to delay it. I don't want to say let's take 6 months and let people choose.
I'd like to make a motion and then people can act on that motion, yes or no.
Okay.
Or should we just score the name of it or something?
I make a motion, I don't have to. They do, Brendan, hold on.
Excuse me.
And I'm not offended if you don't agree with me, that's fine, I'm looking to go on. I would like to make a motion to support the history committee in the recommendation of the name Jeff Scott Fallsbridge.
Okay, we have a motion from Ann Callahan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Mike Labby. Any discussion?
So would there be,
In this
so there's
motion,
not gonna be any public input?
If you
This is
go
what
with my
we're-
motion, then we'll not.
This is what, okay. Just wanted to
So,
clarify.
I mean, I'm just
No,
like,
I can go, you know, it's a push.
get a move.
we need to be focusing a lot of our time on good code
Yes.
and things that really are important.
And it's just. Okay. Any further discussion before we vote? Okay, all in favor? Awesome.
3-1.
Let
And
me
vote.
clarify a question. Is your motion just saying allowing the history committee to send their thing out, or you're also endorsing it, saying the select board does the same?
Allowing them to send it out, because they don't have our authority. I mean, they don't have authority to send it out without us letting them.
Right.
I'm saying they have a right to submit their name, that's my motion.
Okay, Patty, the vote passed 3-1, and that would give authority. That would grant authority from us to them to say, you have our blessing.
To
You have a
submit their thing, now that doesn't mean anybody else can't submit.
Other things.
Other things, yeah, and but we're saying. as-
Friends may have a completely different idea, but
Exactly.
yeah.
I'm just saying that they asked us for permission to send out, and I'm happy with following the process and not just sending it.
Yeah.
That's the point.
They'll be happy to get that. That'll be good. Okay,
One last clarifying question. So the Topsham representatives on the Bridge Advisory Committee, and this is not on your agenda, but I just try to figure out if I should put it on future agenda. They would also they'd like Brunswick and Topsham to endorse that name. Do you want me to put that on a future agenda so you can make that decision separately, or?
Well,
can you reach out to the Brunswick Town Manager to gauge the Brunswick Town Council?
Yeah.
To see what their thoughts are, because it may be a moot point.
we're not gonna have to do anything if they go forward.
And who knows, we could both endorse it and the state could say.
No, that's correct.
We're naming it.
Yeah. And who knows what they're gonna go.
Yeah,
But to your point, we haven't endorsed the name, we've allowed them to submit their paper.
Correct, that is
So I'm
correct.
not saying that that's what we want, we're just allowing them to.
That's
form
correct,
their-
that's my
and
motion.
thank you for following process,
Mhm.
yes.
Good.
Okay, well, then there's only one final motion that's necessary. Oh, we have a motion to adjourn from Mike Labby, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded from Dave Kenny, all in favor? And that is unanimous, we are adjourned, thank you, Patty.
Are you still awake?
You're welcome. Sweet dreams.
That's what the score